time and travel to be part of this lesson this morning. And I can say with my time. And should you have any further questions, please feel free at any time. Right, today we are going to focus on finance, in particular interest and loans. That is what you should be able to do now at the end of this lesson. And of course, the first one is there, where we have the house that costs 895,000 rands. And now you can see on the deposit here is 50%. So the house here is on sale, and of course, the cost of the house is 895,000 rands. And what's important here is that we need to pay a deposit of 15%. And the amount of 20 years, and the interest rate, of course, will be 11% per annum. So that's 11,0 there, 11% per annum. So that's 11% every year of the interest rate. Now, without any waste of time, I want us to calculate the deposit. Now given in percentage form, which is 15%. Now I want you to give me this deposit in value, in monetary value. Meaning that how much will you pay of the 895,000? How much deposit are you going to pay? How? Meaning that you need to calculate of 895,000. And I want us to calculate it together without any waste of time. Let us calculate the 15% of 895,000 rands and give us the answer. Now, if you look into the left-hand side here, I've got 4 possible answers. I've got A, B, C, and D. Now you need to tell me which is the correct answer. I'm talking here about the deposit of 15%. So I hope that you have a pen and a paper with you. And as I'm speaking, you are now trying to calculate the 15% of 895,000. And you should be ready at any time to give me an answer once you have done the calculation. Because quite honestly, it's important to calculate the. So can I see if you have already calculated the percentage, and then we can take it from there. That is 50% of 895,000. Now, as we get on, we can be able to see that 50% of 895,000, we will multiply 15 by 895,000, and then we'll divide the answer by 100. Because 15% simply means 100. And of course, if you divide 15 by 100, and then you multiply the answer there by 895, you will be able to see that the answer that you will get will be 132,450. In other words, 15 divided by 100 gives you 0.15. And if you multiply 0.15 by 895,000, you will get 134 34,250. So C will be the correct answer there. So C will be our correct answer because in 60 now, that is how we proceed as far as calculating the interest is concerned. Now, the second question there will be the loan. What will be the loan amount? So remember, now that you will have paid the deposit of 15%, now calculate the loan amount. What will be the loan amount in this case? Now, in order to get the loan amount, we will take the 15% amount of 895,000. So in other words, we have to take this 258 and subtract that total cost of the house. Now that we've paid a deposit of 134,250, which is 15%, how much will the loan amount be? So the other money or the remaining funds have to be financed. That is the loan that we take to the bank. Now subtract that amount of the 15%, which is the deposit. We need to separate that from the original amount. So that we separate 104,000 rands from 895,000 rands. And so if you look at answers, one of the answers there says the loan amount will be 760,000 rands, 750. And then the other one there would be B, which is 898,000, and then C, 993,450, 20,000. So the which we
Indrek?
will. Yes, ma'am.
Your connection is very, very bad. We can hardly hear you. I've been trying to send you messages in the group chat on Zoom, but we can barely hear you. You keep breaking up.
Okay. Am I clear now?
Yes, you're clear now. I'll let you know. Please keep an eye on the group chat. I'll let you know if there's any problems on there.
Why do you send it on the group? You can send it to me directly.
On Zoom. It's
Zoom.
the group chat, yes.
Okay, thanks. All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay, thank you. I thought it was up. Right. Can I carry on? Right. We are carrying on with our lesson, and of course, the deposit is 15%. That is the amount that we have paid in the house. The amount being 134,250, and that's the 15% of the amount of the total amount of the house, which is 15%. Now that we have paid the deposit, now calculate the loan amount. As I've said, the loan amount will be calculated as follows. You will have to take 895,000 rands and subtract the deposit amount. As we know, it's 134,250. So if you subtract the deposit we will get 760,750. So in other words, the A there will be the correct amount, the loan amount. So that's the correct value of the loan amount. The loan amount now will be 760,750. And this of course right. I do hope that it is clear the deposit amount that we are talking about here, which gave rise to the fact that once you subtract the amount of the deposit from the original amount, then you get 760,750. And of course, as I've just said, this is the money that is to be paid over a period of 20 years at 11% per annum. So just to recap, once again, before we proceed to the next slide, we have a house which is sold here for 895,000 rands. And of course, we are told that the deposit amount will be 15%. And of course, if you ask anybody what is 15% of 895,000 rands, so you need to calculate the 15% of 895,000 rands. And 15% simply means 15 out of 100. So that is 15 out of 100. And then if you want 15% of 895,000 rands, you'll have 15 out of 100 and then multiplied by 895,000 rands. And of course, you will see that the answer that you will get will be A, which is, C, which is 134,000 rands, 250 rands. So it's 134,250. So the second one was, of course, to determine the amount of the loan. So now that you have paid the deposit of 15%, the amount of the loan will be different. In other words, the amount will be reduced from 895,000. So you take the final value or the full value of the house, you subtract the deposit amount. And so if you subtract 134,250 rands from 895,000 rands, you will definitely get 760,750 rands. So you get 760,750 rands. That is the amount for the loan, which, by the way, has to be paid over a lengthy period of 20 years. And the interest rate that will be charged on the loan will be 11%. So before we carry on, now I want you to calculate the interest rate. What will be the interest rate? In other words, once we have determined the value of the sale price, that will be determined by the interest rate that we have to pay. And of course, we have seen that the price of the house is 895,000 rands. That is the price of the entire house. And of course, the other options fall off. Now, if you want to calculate the deposit, we have done that. We have calculated the deposit and we have said that the deposit will be 760. Now, we need to calculate the interest to be paid for the first month. We need to calculate the interest that is to be paid for the first month. Now, remember, I have said to you that the interest rate is 11%. That is what the interest rate is. But this 11% is calculated per annum, not per month. So this is per annum. So meaning that you need to calculate the interest rate per annum, and then you multiply your value there by 20 years. And then, of course, you divide everything there by 12 months because it is per annum. So you need to realize that. So calculate the interest rate to be paid for the first month. So the possible answers there, we've got A, which is 11%. It falls off because 11% is not per month, but it is per annum. So please don't confuse the two. And then, of course, you also have 15% there, which also falls off because 15%, that was the deposit amount. And then we're left with two possible answers there, 11,187 rands and 50 cents and 6,973 rands and 54 cents. So I want us to calculate now the interest which will be paid for the first month in our house. Remember, before we carry on, remember that we have determined the loan amount, and we said that the loan amount will be 760,750 rand. So once you have the amount, as well as the interest rate, as well as the length of the duration of your interest, or rather your loan, you should be able to calculate the interest which will be paid for the first month. So that is what we need there, how much interest will be paid for the first month. And of course, subsequent to that, we are told that if the loan amount is 760,750 for a period of 20 years, and the interest rate is 11%, calculate the monthly repayment. So we need to also calculate the monthly repayment. So I hope that you have a pen and a paper there with you. The first one, of course, will be to calculate the interest which is to be paid for the first month. I've already ruled out 11% and 15% there. And the second one, of course, is to calculate the monthly repayment. So how much are you going to pay on a monthly basis in order to complete the term of your loan? Your loan amount, remember, you have it. You have already calculated your loan amount. Now that you have subtracted the 15% deposit from the original amount. So let me take this opportunity to say that calculate the interest rate to be paid for the first month, but remember, the two possible options there that I'm giving you will be 11,187 rands and 50 cents and 6,973 rands and 54 cents. So I hope that you will be able to use your calculations just to find the interest which will be paid for the first month. So the interest that will be paid for the first month, that is very important. And then again, you need to calculate now the monthly repayment. How much are you going to pay on a monthly basis to fund your house or to pay for your house, or rather the loan that you shall have received, which must be paid for 20 years. How much are you going to pay? So Let us start now with the interest to be paid for the first month. And I've said that you need to realize that the interest there will be, or the interest rate rather, it's 11.0% per annum. So what does this mean? This means that you need to now calculate or find out how much will be 11% of the total amount per annum. So meaning that if you're paying it for 12 years there, I mean for 20 years, we know that every year has got about 12 months. So you need to check how many of those periods, 12 months periods are there in 20 years. And then of course, you can be able to find the interest rate. Can I give you a chance maybe to reflect? I see that we have lost one of our participants again. I wanted us to engage on this calculation, just to calculate the interest to be paid for the first month. And of course, if the loan amount is 760,000 rands and 750 rands, we need to calculate now the monthly repayment loan or the monthly fee that we're going to pay. So very simple. All that we need to do, you have got a choice. You can either use the formula for interest, or you can use the normal calculation of interest by taking the 11%. So in other words, you are going to take the entire amount of 760,000 rands, 750, and then you calculate 11% of that particular amount, and then you can divide it by the number of years. And of course, it should be able to give you a simple answer there, which should be 6,973 rands and 54. That will be the interest that you will pay on a monthly basis. And of course, we also have to calculate the amount which will be paid monthly. Once again, you can use the formula to calculate the monthly amount that you will pay in as far as the loan is concerned. Now, the loan amount of 1 million rands, 520,350 is given there. And then we have the interest rate, which is now 8.5%, and the length of the loan is 20 years. Now, what is the factor value there? Now you can see that we have the loan amount of 1,520,350, and that is the amount. Remember the years. It's very important that we remember the years. This loan length is calculated over a period of 20 years. And of course, the interest is 8.5%. That is what the interest is, 8.5. So we look at the interest there, which is 8.5%, as you can see in our table there. We are running here from 8% right up to 13%. So now our interest rate in this case is 8.5%. Now, for a period of 20 years, this is the 20 years that we have there. This means that our factor value there will be, for 20 years, it will be 8.68%. So that is how the factor value will be in as far as this table is concerned. So 8.68% of the entire period of 20 years. That is what will be reflected on our table there, which is now the factor value. So I do hope that we have taken the time and the trouble to revise these interest rates as well as the loan amount. Remember, there's a formula that we use all the time when we calculate especially simple interest. So there's a difference between a simple interest as well as a compound interest. And that is very interesting in as far as the calculation of bonds or loans are concerned. And of course, as we carry on, you'll be able to see the difference between the simple interest rate as well as the compound interest rate value. So in this case, you can see that we have to choose the correct value there. And of course, the correct value will be 8,68, which is now the factor of the factor value there in the table in as far as the 20-year period is concerned. All right. Now determine the real cost of the loan that is given the 10,32 as a factor. Determine the loan. So once again, if you go back to your table, you will be able to see that 10.2 lies between 10% and 10,25 there. So you should be able to use this value to calculate. Remember, the period is now still 20 years. So if the period is 20 years, then the amount will be 1,520,000. It will now escalate. Remember, the original amount was 1,520,350 rand. So at 8.5%, of course, now if it is 10.32 factor, so your amount is bound to escalate. So meaning that the correct value there, the correct amount will now be 1,884,225 rands and 60 cents once we use the factor value there of 10,32. And then we also need to calculate the interest which has been paid on this loan. How much interest has been paid on the loan? So in order to find the interest paid, obviously we have to subtract the 1,884,000 from the original amount of 1,520,000. And of course, you will see that you'll be left with 132,250 rands once you subtract that. And of course, the factors that can affect the total amount owed on a loan are listed below. You need to choose which is the incorrect, not the correct, which is the incorrect factor. So there are different factors that can affect the total amount that is owed on a loan. And what are those factors? So the total amount that is owed on the loan. So there's one factor there that is not correct. So the first factor there is A is the deposit, B is the interest rate, 3 is the loan length, D there is the compound interest. Now, we are saying that these factors can affect the total amount that is owed on a loan. Choose the one that is not correct. In other words, you need to choose one factor there which will not affect the total amount that is owed on a loan. What is that factor there? Is it the deposit? Is it the interest rate? Is it the loan length? Is it the compound interest? Those are 4 different factors which are given there. And of course, if you can check thoroughly with the first example that we had, you'll remember we had an example where we paid a deposit and then we also had a loan amount. So if you look at the first example there, if I can just take you back to the loan amount that we had, if you look at this loan amount of 760,750 rands, you will realize that that amount is not affected by the deposit. I'm talking about the loan amount. The loan amount is not affected by the deposit. Remember, the total amount was 895,000. And once you pay your deposit, then you subtract it from the total amount. And whatever happens to the loan amount, the deposit has got no bearing there. So in other words, the deposit is independent of the loan amount. The loan amount is different. So even in this case, we are going to see that the deposit will not affect the loan amount. So the loan amount is different, but it can be affected by a wide range of factors, such as the interest rates. So the interest rates do have a bearing on the loan that you take. At times when the interest rates are increased, either by the bank or the Reserve Bank, that can have a bearing on the loan that you owe to the bank. And of course, the loan length. I mean, if the more years you add to your loan, that's the more you will pay. In other words, if your loan takes, for example, 20 years, and someone pays the same loan in 10 years, if you are paying over a period of 20 years, you are likely to pay more. So yes, the loan length can affect the total amount that you owe on a loan. And the other thing is the compound interest. The compound interest, if you take, the longer it takes for your loan to be settled, then it means we're also talking about compound interest. What is compound interest? That is interest that is paid on interest. In other words, if your interest is paid on per annum, and you take a loan for a period of 5 years, for example, then at the end of the first year, you pay your interest. And at the end of the second year, you pay the interest on the total amount that you have paid, meaning that where this interest has already been calculated, that is compound interest. So yes, the compound interest can definitely affect the amount or the total amount that is owed on a loan. And of course, the correct answers or the correct answer or the incorrect factor, in fact, here will be the deposit, because the deposit is just an amount that you pay long before the loan can be approved. So you pay the deposit first, and then your loan is approved, and then you can start paying interest on your loan. Then there's a length of your loan there, and there's compound interest. Now, 10 there says the shorter the period of the loan, the shorter the amount of the time to earn interest. So listen carefully. The shorter the period of the loan, the shorter the amount of time to earn interest. So in other words, like I've just said, this question emanates from the previous one. If your loan period is short, then even the amount will be easier to pay. In other words, you will not pay more in as far as the interest is concerned. Of course, on a monthly basis, you can pay high amount, reason being you are taking a shorter term, but the interest at the end of the day, when you look at the entire amount that is owed on a loan, it will be lesser on a shorter period than on a longer period. That is how it goes in as far as this shorter period is concerned. Now, we are coming to the larger deposit. We are told here that the larger the deposit, the larger the loan amount. Is it true or false? So let's look at the first example where you had to pay your deposit of 15%. You paid the deposit of 15% in the original amount there, And you'll recall that after paying the deposit, you were left with a loan amount of 760,000 rands. And that was a 15% deposit that you paid. So imagine if you had increased your deposit. Let's say you paid double the deposit. Would the loan amount increase or decrease? So obviously, if you pay the larger deposit, the loan amount will decrease. So the statement which says the larger the deposit, the larger the loan amount is a false statement. If you pay more deposit, you are actually reducing the loan amount. Just take the example of just 100 rands. If I have to borrow you 100 rand, and then I'm borrowing two friends 100 rands each, friend X and friend Y. I give each of my friends 100 rand each. Friend X receives 100 rands, and friend Y also receives 100 rands from me. And you know, the friend A gives me a deposit there, you know, to settle the amount, and it gives me 50%, meaning that it gives me half, and then the remaining half becomes a loan amount. So if he gives me 50 rands, then it means he will be left with 50 rands that he must pay. So if I charge 50 an interest, same interest on 50 rands, but the other one has given me 30%. So obviously, the one with a smaller deposit will have to pay more in as far as the amount is concerned. So the larger the deposit, the larger the loan amount. So even in a house, if you are buying, or a car, if you buy a car, two friends buy a car which is worth 100,000 each, and the first friend pays a deposit of 30,000 rands. The second friend pays a deposit of 50,000 rands. Obviously, the loan amount of the friend who paid 50,000 rands, the loan amount will be less because he will have to get a loan of 50,000 rands. But the one who pays 30,000 rands, the loan amount will be 70,000 rands. So in other words, the larger the deposit, the smaller the loan amount. So if you pay a large deposit, your loan amount will be small. Right, and then of course, that was it in as far as the other concern is raised. The lower the interest rate, the lower the amount charged on the loan. So now we're talking about the interest rate. If the interest rate is low, then the amount charged, the amount charged on the loan will also be low. Yes, this is true, because once the interest rate is low, then it means the total amount of the loan will also be low. But if the interest rate is high, then it also affects the amount charged on the loan. So if the amount charged on the loan is 50,000 rands, for instance, and the interest rate is 5%, it will be lower than if the interest rate was, say, 20%. If the interest rate is 20%, I mean 20% of 50,000, it is more than 5% of the same 20,000 of the same 50,000 rands. So 20% of 50,000 is bigger than 5% of 50,000 rands. So the lower the interest rate, the lower the amount charged on the loan. So yes, if the interest rates are low, then the amount will also be low on the loan. And then of course, we will be looking at the loans solutions as well in our next lesson. But just to wrap up, of course, we have spoken about the amount of the loan that needs to be paid when you buy a house. And we spoke about the house, which is given as 895,000. And of course, the deposit of the house was 15%. And remember that when you see a house, if you pay the entire amount, then you will pay the exact amount. Like people who buy properties, if you pay the cash amount, then it means you pay less than someone who pays a deposit. Because if you pay a deposit of 15%, and then that will give you money to, you'll be left with a loan amount. So remember that the 15% was calculated as 132,000 rands. In fact, 134,000 rands. That's the 15% of the 895. So once you have paid the deposit, then you'll have the loan amount. Remember, the loan amount, how is it calculated? That is the amount that remains after the deposit has been made. But that amount changes because of the interest rate. It will be changed by the interest rate, but also it will be changed by the length of the loan. So in other words, if your loan is 20 years, then your interest rate will run for 20 years. Remember, it will be 11% per annum. So every year you pay 11% interest rate. So the longer it takes for you to pay the loan, the more money you will pay, because you are paying 11% every year. Now, if the years were to be reduced, in other words, if you were to take this loan over a period of 10 years, then definitely your total loan amount will be reduced, because if you take it for 10 years, then it means you only pay 11% per annum, only for 10 years, and that's it. But if you paid for 20 years, then it will escalate. And of course, others may want their terms to be extended for a period of 30 years, after which the loan will also increase. I mean, the total loan amount will increase, because if you paid for 30 years at 11% per annum, it means that every year you are paying 11%, and that will be done for a period of 30 years. And remember, if it is compound interest, it becomes worse, because then you don't just pay 11% per annum. You will pay interest on interest per annum. And of course, we have also looked at the role that is played by the different scenarios there. The first being whether the amount which is owed on a loan can be affected by factors. Yes, there are different factors that can affect the total amount which is owed on a loan. And of course, those factors are the interest rate, the loan length, which is the period of the time that it takes for you to complete your loan payment, and of course, the compound interest as well. It can definitely affect your total amount that is owed on a loan. But again, we realize that the shorter the period of the loan, the shorter the amount. Yes, that is true. If you take your loan for 5 years, the amount of loan that you'll pay will be lesser than if you take the same loan for a period of 20 years. So for a period of 20 years, you will pay more. But if you take a period of 5 years, you will pay less. So yes, the shorter the period of the loan, the shorter the amount of time to earn the interest. And of course, if you make a large deposit, you will not have a large loan amount. In fact, you'll have a lesser loan amount. The larger the deposit, the lesser the loan amount. But the lesser the deposit, the larger the loan amount. This actually brings us to the end of our lesson this morning. It's a great pity that we did not have any participants who were able to comment on the lesson. but I hope that as we carry on the participation, we'll know for our lesson. And of course, for tomorrow, once again, we are at Africa Teen Geeks. That is our Twitter page, where you can find us, but also on Facebook, Africa Teen Geeks. This education was brought to you by the Lockdown is School in partnership with the Sasol Foundation. And that was Maths Literacy, grade 11. Thank you very much indeed.